We are delighted to be hosting today's announcement of the 2012 Trudeau Foundation Fellows. On behalf of the University, let me extend a warm welcome to our colleagues from the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation and from universities across the country. Welcome. And of course, congratulations to all the new Trudeau Fellows who you will be meeting in just a few minutes. So since its founding in 2001, the Trudeau Foundation has encouraged scholarship and innovative commentary on social issues and public policy by supporting many of the leading thinkers of our time and those of the next generation. So I would now like to invite Dr. Pierre Gelée-Forest to tell us more about the Foundation and its programs. Pierre.
So, thank you. Peut-être un mot en français, peut-être pour commencer. La Fondation est une institution nationale et nous tenons beaucoup au bilinguisme et à la présence des langues fondatrices à la Fondation. Alors, c'est sûr qu'on est très honoré d'être ici aujourd'hui. La Fondation, vous le savez, existe essentiellement pour servir les universités et c'est un très grand plaisir, un très grand honneur d'avoir ici avec nous les représentants de 4 des plus grandes universités du pays. Depuis la création de notre organisation, nous avons établi des liens très, très étroits avec les universités et j'espère que les annonces d'aujourd'hui sont simplement le prolongement et une promesse pour l'avenir. It's a real pleasure to be among so many friends. If we are to start to recognize people, you will be there for about 2 hours, so I won't do it. It's a great day for the Foundation. You know, we spend a lot of time and energy selecting the Trudeau Fellows, and maybe you would like to know how we came with those 4 names in the end. So a year like in 2012, we received 71 fresh nominations for those prizes, and you have to realize those are very complex, very thick files that arrive at the Foundation with publications, CVs, letters, testimonies, and so on and so forth. And with the help of a few external advisors, we take that list of 71 names and we produce a short list of this year 20 names. If I remember, yes, 20 names for the regular fellows and 5 names for the visiting. And again, those are very different files because the Foundation covers the full range of the social sciences and the humanities. They're very different from one another. We send those names, those files, to a very distinguished panel of people that have sit on the panel for the Order of Canada, the selection panel for the Royal Society of Canada, that have a lot of experience in making that kind of judgment. And we asked the members of the panel to actually not only look at the CV and the letters, but also to read the publications of the candidates. It's a lot of work. It takes a lot of time doing it, and I'm very happy to get names from people that are ready to volunteer for this at the end of the session today. But when I called the fellows, when we finally get a decision from the board about the appointment, this is the first thing I mentioned to them, that whatever happened now, it's very clear that among all your peers, people looking at your publications and looking at what you have done in your career, have decided that you were worth a Trudeau Fellowship, and I think it's a great accomplishment. So all this to say that the 4 fellows we will be announcing today are outstanding. What they will do with us for the next few years is to provide intellectual leadership to what we call the Trudeau community. The large number of people we fund are scholars, our mentors, and the other fellows. So we expect from them intellectual leadership, and but I'm pretty sure they will also provide the same kind of leadership to Canada and the world to make sure we will live in a more just and better society. So congratulations and thank you very much.
So thank you, Dr. Forest. Now, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Professor Ruby Heap, Associate Vice President Research at the University of Ottawa.
Je vais commencer aussi en français. L'Université d'Ottawa étant une université bilingue, c'est très important. Alors, merci beaucoup, M. Forêt, à la Fondation Trudeau, pour m'inviter aujourd'hui. C'est une opportunité incroyable que j'ai de présenter notre nouvelle lauréate et mes félicitations aux autres fellows aussi. So it's a great opportunity that I have here today to officially welcome to the University of Ottawa its 2012 Trudeau Visiting Fellow, Maria Campbell, Canada's foremost Métis artist and cultural leader. The Faculty of Arts Institute of Canadian Studies, where is located our Chair of Métis Research, Dr. Brenda McDougall, and here she is. And I want to congratulate you as well, because I know you are very closely connected to this great honor that we have today. So the Institute of Canadian Studies will proudly host Ms. Campbell during her stay on our campus. Her presence amongst us will benefit the University of Ottawa in several ways. It will create a synergy of research and scholarship around Métis society, history, and culture by drawing together a community of scholars engaged in this field at our institution. And of course, we want to see that number of researchers growing. This, in turn, will help the University of Ottawa strengthen and expand its relationship with the Ontario Métis, which was formally sanctioned by the signature of MOU in 2009. And we have representatives of the Métis Nation of Ontario, so welcome and thank you for being here. And also, this relationship was sanctioned as well by the establishment of the Chair of Métis Research soon after, and of course, Dr. McDougall is the first holder of this very important chair. In sum, the visiting fellowship awarded to Maria Campbell will both increase the capacity and profile of Métis research and activities at the University of Ottawa, and also attest to the university's strong commitment to the Métis Nation of Ontario and Métis people across Canada. I am therefore greatly honored to introduce to you today the University of Ottawa's 2012 Visiting Trudeau Fellow, Maria Campbell. Maria?
I'm very nervous. Kinaskum nawa, ever killed and wakomagana kayachik, we storm in and naskumawak, mutene petotean, we beg with me petotean. I'm really honored to be here as a Trudeau Fellow and to be a part of this amazing group of people. Who would have imagined that I would end up here? You know, a little girl sitting on a beaver dam on the river dreaming impossible dreams. I want to thank the University of Ottawa and in particular Brenda McDougall for nominating me and all the people and all the people who supported the nomination. Thank you to members of the Trudeau Foundation for choosing me. And to my children who've always been there for me. I want to thank them for helping a blind lady see. I'm looking forward to the next 3 years and the body of work that I'll be able to complete and the research that I'll be able to do. Never have I ever had this luxury or time to do that. I have 3 projects that are almost finished, which would normally have taken me another 2 or 3 years, because artists have to work. But I'll be able to finish those before the 1st of June. One is a small collection of essays on cultural and traditional knowledge, and it's oral stories, teachings, superstitions, and recipes from many Métis kitchens. It doesn't sound real academic, but believe me, it is. When you want to learn about a people, you look at the food and the kitchens they come from. For example, a story of old lady hunting, which is cultural teaching, with the end result being partridge, cooked over an open fire. And today it's partridge cooked in dark chocolate in a city kitchen. So there's contemporary recipes with those. And the second one is a collection of essays about traditional and cultural knowledge. And it's work that I've done with elders over the last probably 35 years in Métis community across Canada. So those are all they just need work with an editor. And then the final piece of work is to workshop and finish the last draft of a musical, a historical musical. That's just about done. And then the big research project, which will end up as a paper and hopefully a collection of essays. I love essays. I've never published a collection of essays, but I've written lots of them. And this explores the roots of violence against Aboriginal women in Canada. How did we come from women-centered societies where we had respect, influence, power, and autonomy to societies where violence against us is reflected in every aspect of Aboriginal life? I grew up in violence in my home and in my community. I spent my school life in violence, experienced violence in the outside community, to the point where it was almost a normal thing. And I worked for over 40 years as a volunteer, both with women in crisis and also helping to establish shelters for women and having a safe house in my home. And the realization that I come to is that if we're going to move forward as to a healthy and good place, then we need to understand what we had and how we lost it. And this Trudeau Fellowship will make all that work possible. And so I want to thank all of you, and thank you, BJ and Jennifer, for all the work that you've done, Elise. And thank you to my daughter who's here and my niece who are representing her family. And again, Brenda. Kiranaskum now. Hi.
Thank you, Professor Heap and Marie Campbell. Now I invite Professor Doug Harris, the Associate Dean, Graduate Studies and Research in the Faculty of Law at the University of British Columbia, to the podium.
Thank you. It's my very great pleasure to be back at the University of Toronto and in the Faculty of Law, and actually in the classroom where just over 20 years ago I sat through Lorraine Weinrib's absolutely marvelous introduction to Canadian constitutional law. It seems fitting to mention that, given the announcement today is from a foundation, the man whose name it bears had such a profound effect on Canada's Constitution. I'm even more delighted to introduce my friend and colleague, Professor Catherine Dauverne, who is UBC's 5th Trudeau Fellow. Catherine is a scholar of immigration and refugee law. She's also a teacher, much sought after in the classroom, and the builder of an extraordinary group of graduate students, 2 of whom are the holders of Trudeau Doctoral Fellows themselves, or doctoral scholars themselves. She is also a lawyer, appearing in the courts on behalf of those whose lives have become entangled in the laws that govern the flows of people. But Catherine is being recognized as a Trudeau Fellow because she uses the theory and practice of immigration and refugee law as a portal into the rapidly changing modern world. This is perhaps best exemplified in her much reprinted and award-winning book, Making People Illegal: What Globalization Means for Migration and Law. In this book, which is a study of the relationship between globalization and illegal migration, Catherine argues that migration law has become the last bastion of state sovereignty. Unable to control the flows of capital, of technology, of ideas, intangibles all, nation-states focus on the body and patrol their borders with laws designed to manage the last significant flow that they can control, that of people. They do so by implementing laws designed to attract some while making others illegal. Catherine's work has the extraordinary capacity to seem immediately and fundamentally relevant. And I had, when I read Making People Illegal, the somewhat disturbing and disquieting feeling that I had chosen the wrong field of study, right? That I should pull up my academic roots and transplant them within the field of migration law. Why was I not studying the flows of people around the globe, the state-erected barriers to those flows, and what migration law reveals about the nature and place of law in the creation of a just society? That is the power of Catherine's work. The state and its limits are to remain her focus. With a Trudeau Fellowship and a $500,000 grant from the Australian Research Council, Catherine has embarked on the provocatively titled The End of Settler Societies and the New Politics of Immigration. I will let Catherine say a few more words about this project, if she wishes, in her words. But it seems to me that this is exactly the type of project that the Trudeau Foundation was designed to inspire and support. This project, well, fundamentally international in scope, goes right to the heart of this country's identity. What does the end of settler societies look like from and within Canada? This question and other fundamental questions about the role of law, about the nature of the modern world, reveal the scope and the possibility of Catherine's work to understand the nature of that modern world and, importantly, to imagine a better one. I introduce to you UBC's Trudeau Fellow and my friend Catherine Deverne.
Thank you, Doug. And the podium's not too low at all. I have to say it's a little high. Thank you for that very generous introduction. And Maria, I have to say thank you just for putting it out there that one is actually nervous, even though one spends one's entire career standing up and talking to groups like this on occasions such as these. And I also want to thank the Trudeau Foundation for this unique and very precious opportunity. This fellowship is an overwhelming honor and a truly delightful surprise. What I most want to do over the next 3 years is to find ways to honor the Foundation's confidence in my ideas. For almost 20 years now, I've been working on borders, on understanding why some people are allowed in and some are kept out, and what this says both for and about the nation that does the choosing. My work is about immigration and identity, about refugees and law, about deportation, detention, and what we now call security. At this historical juncture, this terrain in which I work is shifting significantly. The Canadian government is working, subtly and unsubtly, to remake our immigration landscape. And it is not alone. Western liberal democracies have been shifting the global frameworks for immigration for some years now. I'm interested in these shifts at every level, what they mean for global power dynamics, how they alter economies, how they shape national identities, and most compellingly, what they mean for the people whose lives they touch directly, for people who front up at the border with or without the right papers, for people who need to flee their homelands and don't have another choice except for finding another space in which to live. In these global times, the hierarchies of privilege have been reshaped and can be measured by a quick count of who can cross borders and how many they can cross, and who cannot cross any border at all. And so, this fellowship comes at a time when I find there are new challenges for my work opening up almost daily. I believe that it's vitally important that we begin to think about immigration in new ways, that our stock stories of Canada as a nation of immigration and of our humanitarian tradition do not fit our reality well anymore, and that their enduring mythology impairs our vision of the present and therefore blinds us to the future. In some ways, it's accurate to say that this idea was the starting point in my intellectual career, but the work is ever more pressing. I guess there was a time when I imagined that I would get older and this project that I was working on then would be finished and I would move on to something else. And that is the great and wonderful thing about a legal education. It's a generalist profession. It's wonderful to be in the practice of law, and you can turn around tomorrow and become a corporate lawyer. But instead, which I think is fascinating and I may yet do, but instead, what I'm finding with age is a sense that I might well run out of time, a sense that a very few small and straightforward ideas about justice and borders really do require the world to change, and that changing the world involves shifting a lot of stones, large and small, one at a time, some very heavy. And given all of this, the Trudeau Fellowship could not have come out of the blue, really, at a better time for me. I aim to use this award as a promise to myself to be bolder, to take bigger intellectual risks, and to take them more loudly. Rethinking how we understand migration, who gets to move and how, is creative work. It's circuitous and intuitive. And like all idea work, you just never know where or how or when the best new idea is going to arise. The fellowship is wonderful for creative work because it allows for the time and the space and the quiet in which new ideas can truly arise. And the Trudeau Foundation also challenges all of its fellows to follow their ideas, or our ideas, I guess I have to get used to saying our ideas, to follow our ideas into the real world, to actually make change. And so the fellowship is wonderful for me because this is the challenge that I most want. And so that brings me to the last thing that I want to say today. I grew up in Edmonton with a childhood of just immense privilege, with all the safety and security and good fortune that led me to believe that I could change the world. And it's really my parents, and my mom is here today with me, who raised a child strange and audacious enough to think that changing the world was important. And more importantly, to believe that if you could change the world, that's what you really ought to be doing. So my final thank you to you, Mom. Thank you.
So, thank you, Professor Harris and Professor Dovan. Now please join me in welcoming Robert Haché, Vice President Research and Innovation at York University. Robert.
Thank you, Paul. Il me fait plaisir aussi de représenter l'Université York et d'exprimer notre appréciation du travail de la Fondation Trudeau. York, à travers du Collège Glendon, est aussi privilégié d'offrir une formation universitaire dans les deux langues officielles. I'm pleased to be here today to honor this year's Trudeau Fellows and to recognize and celebrate the exceptional research achievements of Professor Janine Marchessault and her colleagues. We were delighted to learn that Professor Marchessault has received a Trudeau Fellowship this year. The Trudeau Fellowship is a prestigious honor bestowed upon leading academics and public intellectuals who have demonstrated exceptional research achievements, creativity, and commitment to social affairs. We are proud that another of York's leading researchers has become a member of this highly privileged group. As Canada's third largest university and one of the leading interdisciplinary research and teaching universities in the country, York's researchers include many pioneers and leaders in their respective fields, and the scholarly work of York's newest Trudeau Fellow provides a shining example. On behalf of York University, I'd like to thank the Trudeau Foundation for recognizing the contributions and commitments of York's researchers I would like to take this opportunity as well to tell you a little bit more about Dr. Marchessault's work. Janine Marchessault is a professor of cinema and media studies at York, where she holds the Canada Research Chair in Art, Digital Media, and Globalization. Her work has focused on the creative cultures of urban space, examining cities such as Berlin, Havana, Helsinki, Montreal, and Toronto. She is the director of the Visible City Project and an online archive which features interviews with artists, filmmakers, and creative professionals who reflect on and discuss how art and communication are expressed in diverse geopolitical contexts. One of Canada's renowned McLuhan scholars, Professor Marchessault has also co-curated a number of large-scale public art exhibitions, including one last weekend, that have invited local and international artists to consider sustainability and urban planning through the lens of our current global ecological challenges. York's Faculty of Fine Arts, Janine's home faculty, is one of North America's premier educational and research faculties for the visual, performing, and digital arts, featuring the largest, most comprehensive program of its kind in Canada and the only fine arts faculty in the province of Ontario. We at York are strongly committed to the inclusion of global cultures, collaborative and interdisciplinary work, and intercultural research. We are proud that Janine has been selected as a Trudeau Fellow this year. I'd like to take this opportunity to congratulate her personally on her outstanding contributions to scholarship and on this well-deserved and prestigious honor. The York community also joins me in congratulating you. Now I'd like to invite Janine to say a few words.
J'aimerais commencer par remercier la Fondation Trudeau. C'est vraiment un grand honneur de pouvoir rejoindre cette communauté et puis j'ai vraiment hâte de commencer à travailler avec eux. As Catherine said, you know, the fellowship, I like the way you put it, a precious surprise. I want to thank my colleague in the Faculty of Fine Arts at York University, Professor Michael Longford, for the nomination, and Michael and I are involved in all kinds of projects, so thank you for that. I am absolutely thrilled. The fellowship represents a recognition not only of my academic research, but of my creative community projects, and you know, these are strange. I call them weirdo projects. They're very interdisciplinary. There have been shifts in the domain of art curation over the past 10 years. People don't make objects that go on walls anymore. People make what's called relational aesthetics, things that bring communities together that allow them to have conversations. So I've been involved in that for the past couple of years, and York, being the university that it is, has really recognized that as innovative research, and the Trudeau Foundation is also recognizing that, so I thank you. So my approach to understanding media, art, and urbanism grows out of the Toronto School of Communication, so it's nice that we're here, through the work of Harold Innes and Marshall McLuhan. The latter in particular, tempered by contemporary feminism, has been a crucial influence on my thinking in terms of understanding really the central role that media plays in the everyday lives of citizens, but also towards comprehending the way that media may play a central role in the creation of global community. In the face of current ecological catastrophes, the exigencies of intercultural communication has taken on great urgency. The future of global citizenship depends on our capacity to communicate across cultures and worlds. In this sense, I believe that art has a special function to play, not only in fostering community connections, but also in creating new insights, probes, as McLuhan would call them, that allow us to think the world anew. And I think that we are at a point where we really do need to think the world anew and think about relationships across the world. My research, writing, and curatorial practices generally revolve around a materialist and historical approach to media technology, as well as urban placemaking practices and ecology. Issues of representation, deep community engagement, and political agency were critical to my early research on the Challenge for Change program launched at the National Film Board of Canada in the 1960s. This was an absolute landmark community media experiment working with film, video, and television. My central inspiration, though, over the past decade is without a doubt the radical experiments that took place at Expo 67. And I've been involved with a group of researchers who are excavating these multi-screen media experiments. These are some of the first satellite broadcasts around the world. And, you know, Canada invented large IMAX 3D technology and all kinds of innovation in sound technology. So it's just been a delight to be able to dig up these films at the National Archives of Canada or at the Cinémathèque Québécoise, and we're planning a large exhibition as well as a book to highlight these innovations. Over the past 5 years, I've been involved in creating large site-specific projects that involve dozens of artists, urban planners and developers, high school students, and a new generation of graduate students that recognize the importance that research cannot simply take place inside of the walls of the academy, but that universities have a responsibility to create bridges to a variety of communities occupying different sectors, because if we are going to change things, we need to bring those different communities together. We need to have a public conversation around the massive urbanization that is redefining the surface and oceans of the planet. My 2009 exhibition, the Leona Drive Project, was really the first instantiation of this kind of site-specific community building, and it involved taking over 6 vacant bungalows on a little street in the north of Toronto, and we actually got a developer to allow us to stage this exhibition. A few days ago, I co-curated a Nuit Blanche exhibition called Museum for the End of the World at Nathan Phillips Square in the underground parking garage. For those of you that are from out of town, Nuit Blanche occupies the city for 12 hours in a variety of different locations. It is a moment where art transforms the city and where millions of people come into the city to see art, and the city is open to them. There is a sense of public space. So the museum included 17 installations and a public symposium in council chambers. So this was exciting, as well as being able to take over council chambers that engaged with the concept of end times and the theme of crisis and creativity, the idea that the world is in transition. Landslide, an exhibition on possible futures, continues this conversation on our world in transition with a special focus on land use. The exhibition will be staged across the 25 acres of the Markham Museum and surrounding areas next September, a year from now. That museum is quite unique. It is a heritage village museum, but with a twist. They are interested in being open and inviting artists to come in and reinterpret the past. So the museum contains 30 pioneer houses, 80,000 artifacts ranging from the 1820s to the 1930s. So we're inviting 20 local and international artists to reimagine, reinterpret a past that might lead to a future of sustainable living in one of the largest and fastest growing regions in North America. Markham was a suburb. It has recently become a city. We're inviting artists from Asia, Latin America, and Europe. And the central focus is the absolute groundbreaking impact of Ontario's 1.8 million acre greenbelt in fighting climate change by radically reducing greenhouse emissions and supporting the future of food production around the greater Toronto area. This is a huge crisis brewing. So I'm so grateful that the fellowship will support this exhibition as well as other activities around the exhibition. We're planning a large international symposium in collaboration with the ROM around the issue of art, land, and change. And there'll be a publication as well. So the ideas behind all of these projects are further elaborated in my forthcoming book, Ecstatic World, Media, Humanism, and Art, forthcoming with MIT Press, and the fellowship will also allow me to complete this project. At the end of the World Nuit Blanche Symposium last Saturday evening, Slovenian philosopher Slavoj Žižek offered insights around a world in transition. Arguing that civic discourse needs to focus on the global, the universal, the planetary, through the optic of a radical humanism. And this is no easy task. And he pointed out that the public sphere is increasingly privatized, and not simply that it's commodified, but really that the way that we're using technology, cell phones, Twitter, social media, is creating bubbles around ourselves rather than connecting ourselves, and that the public sphere, public space, is being eroded. I think that art might well be a way to reanimate this common ground. So, thank you.
Thank you, Robert, and thank you, Professor Marchessault. Now I am pleased to invite my colleague, Professor Cheryl Mizek, the University of Toronto's Vice President and Provost, to the podium. Cheryl.
It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you today Professor Joseph Heath of the Department of Philosophy at the University of Toronto. Joe is one of the very best thinkers in the world on the topics, and the important topics, of practical rationality, economics and society, and distributive justice. His two books in academic philosophy, Following the Rules and Communicative Action and Rational Choice, have made major marks in their respective fields, as have his papers, which are published in the very best journals. I also happen to be a philosopher, and indeed, I was on the search committee that hired Joe Heath. So it gives me extra pleasure today to honor a dear friend and colleague whose work I know is so deserving of the highest honors. And indeed, I think it's especially apt that Joe is honored today by the Trudeau Foundation, as he is utterly committed to the dream of a strong, unified Canada with distinct languages and cultures. Indeed, he used to describe to me his time at the University of Montreal as a Western boy trying to make good on that dream. One of the philosophers I work on, and the father of the discipline of psychology, is William James. He says in 1907, bemoaning the inaccessible state of Harvard philosophy, "I have heard friends and colleagues try to popularize philosophy in this very hall, but they soon grew dry and then technical, and the results were only partially encouraging." James had a passion for what we would today call being a public intellectual. And like James, Joe Heath is a public intellectual. Also like James, he is never dry. He works brilliantly on both technical academic philosophy and on public philosophy, peppering everything with deep insight, snappy writing, and compelling examples. His results, unlike those of the Harvard philosophers of whom James despaired, are always encouraging. His popular books, Filthy Lucre, you have to like the title, published in the US as Economics Without Illusions. Yet again, the Canadians beat the Americans in titles. Also, The Rebel Cell and The Efficient Society have had tremendous impact on the public, on our students here at the University of Toronto, and one hopes, for the sake of us all, on public policymakers. Joe.
Yes, so I'd like to thank Cheryl for the generous introduction and to the foundation for this incredible honor. It is, for me, a real particular honor being honored by the Trudeau Foundation, because I've always been something of a Trudeau nerd. And in fact, in our household, my wife Alice is here today, in our household, Trudeau is sort of one of the great names. Our children have already heard about him. There's a reason for that. So both Alice and I grew up in Saskatoon, and both of us in our own ways, our lives were very, very profoundly affected by Trudeau's vision for Canadian society. And in many ways, the trajectory of our lives were very much determined by that. And so Alice, her family immigrated to Canada from Taiwan in the early 70s and was part of that first wave of Chinese immigration, new wave of Chinese immigration after the place of origin restriction was eliminated on our immigration controls in 1967 when Pierre Trudeau was Minister of Justice. And then, of course, the multiculturalism policy, which he introduced. And so in Alice's family and Alice's parents, they all know Trudeau. And immediately there's that recognition. And he was the man who made it possible for us to have our life that we had here in Canada. Now, so I didn't come from Taiwan. I had a very different experience. My father was born in Regina, but I started elementary school at a time when people were starting to create French schools in Saskatchewan, something that had not previously existed. And so again, in that same period in the early 70s, Francophone parents in Saskatchewan were getting together and creating French language schools. And for reasons too complicated to get into, they didn't quite have enough kids. And so my dad, who's here today as well, always being a sport, said, "I got a kid." You can have him. It took me 30 years to get the straight story out of him as to how I wound up in a French school, where I was one of only 2 kids speaking English in the class. So I wound up in a French school, and as a result, in my primary education, acquired a pretty good accent. That is, I learned French, growing up in an Anglophone family in the middle of Saskatchewan. And that, for my life, was determinative. I moved to Montreal and stayed there, came to love the city, and eventually became a professor at the Université de Montréal, teaching in French. And so I would often say to people when they'd say, "Oh, the bilingualism policy was a failure," there's a certain version of it that was a failure. That is that, I mean, Trudeau did sometimes talk as though, everybody was just going to, learn both languages, and people in Alberta would just happily switch to French and so forth. That particular version of the vision did not carry out. But there was, a more carefully formulated version of it, which was that it was about creating opportunity. And in particular, it was about strengthening the country. And so one of Pierre Trudeau's most famous lines is to say that Canada will be a strong country when people from all provinces feel comfortable in all parts of the country. And that particular vision of it was enormously successful and very, very much determined the trajectory of my life. So as I was, after a couple years of teaching philosophy at Université de Montréal, I'm starting to feel comfortable here. This may be a little bit presumptuous, but when I look at our lives and our family, I do in many ways think that we, in our own little way, embody the vision of Canada that he wanted to accomplish. And it's a vision that we still associate with his name. So as for the award, I have to say that I'm very enthusiastic about joining the Trudeau Foundation community. And I have to say that the community is not an abstraction. The Trudeau Foundation community is a very real thing. And that is that people actually get together and we actually talk about issues that concern us, and we actually get to meet each other from across the country. And one of the great challenges in Canada is a geographic challenge, in that it's a very, very big country. And I am constantly lamenting the fact that I often see colleagues not at conferences in Winnipeg, but at conferences in Atlanta. And it can often be very difficult to get people together. And one of the things that I think illustrates it is the fact that here I have these 2 marvelous colleagues whom I've never met before. And Janine is just, she's, at York, so it's further than where the subway goes. But we've never met. Now, strangely, Maria's known me since I was about this tall, but that's a completely different story. And so I'm extremely enthusiastic about joining that community and participating in the activities of the foundation and the way in which it brings together Canadians to reflect upon the country, about the future, and about the nature of the common good. So finally, what I'm going to do, this is a slightly more pedestrian note, but in terms of my plans, as Cheryl mentioned, I do both academic and popular work, and I like to alternate them, because if you do too much popular work, then your colleagues stop taking you seriously. And so every time I've done a popular book, I do an academic one afterwards. But I have this problem, which is that the time the process of academic publishing runs at about half the speed of the process of popular publishing. And so I tend to have these strange years where 2 books appear simultaneously. And people say, oh, he's such a workhorse. But in fact, the academic one was written first, all on its own. And then it just took forever to get published. So that by the time it actually comes in print, I've already done the popular one and it's gotten printed and so on. So I'm having one of those years right now. That is that I have an academic project, which I have been working on for a very long time, which is getting put together. And so it's coming up from Oxford. It's called Morality, Competition, and the Firm. And it's at the intersection of business ethics and questions about morality, capitalism, and market economies. So that's coming out. And then I also have a popular book that I just finished, this has nothing to do with the Trudeau Foundation, but it happens to be called Enlightenment 2.0. And it's a general plea for reason over passion in politics. And it confronts the problem of the rising tide of irrationalism and anti-rationalism in our politics. And so that book is on the fast track. So what I always wind up with is one of these years where both books simultaneously need to be put into production. And I have one of those years ahead. And so the fellowship will be enormously valuable to me, not only in allowing me to participate in the activities and travel and participate in the community, but also in being able to hire people to do sort of the kind of bread and butter work that's involved in preparing 2 books for publication. And so all of this is just an enormous benefit to me in terms of my ability to pursue my work. And so I want to thank the Foundation and to thank you all, particularly my family, for coming. Thank you.